Citizens of football land, welcome back to the Badlands feed. It's a combo episode. What's going on, y'all? You see, it's me. I got Will P in the building. What's going on, Will? How you been?
Good, man. Good. I'm finally caught up on a little sleep from Mobile. Got a little bit of a stomach bug on the way home yesterday.
Mm.
Highly unfortunate. But we're back. We're better than ever, and I'm ready to talk some staff changes and some prospects.
Love to see it. You see, he's going through a little flu game right now, and you can see there's
Nice
no
comedy.
hesitation. No, no hesitation. Jump back on the pod. Absolute warrior. All right. So let's talk. So we got a lot of stuff going on. Oop, a little loud. A lot of stuff going on around the league, and plenty of stuff going on with the Jets. And in particular, all the staff hirings going around. It feels like the Jets, with all the craziness that's happening around the league, they might be the most fortunate team so far in all of the moving around and all the drama. It seems like the Jets have basically got everyone that they wanted for the most part, and everyone that is somewhat tied to Aaron Glenn in the past in some type of way. And so let's go through a couple of these. So obviously the big one, Steve Wilks, the defensive coordinator hire. Yeah, what do you think about that? And what were your thoughts when the rumors were coming in and then eventually got announced?
Yeah, so I'll start. Yeah, we can definitely start with Wilkes. Wilkes is a guy that, look, I think he's been successful as a defensive coordinator. He's had some success as it was an interim head coach, was successful. Obviously, the year in Arizona was a bit of a disaster. But look, at Josh Rosen and the Cardinals as a whole, that I don't put too much stock in that. What I do put stock in is he's somebody that has been a head coach, at least understands the ins and outs of what that may look like, and little nuanced things he could help with. He's been obviously a very successful defensive coordinator. I think. Look, do I think that he was amazing in 2023 at the Niners? Thought he was good. I thought that defense was good. I think Kyle Shanahan had to fire somebody after the Super Bowl, and Steve Wilkes was the guy who was going to fire himself. Now, do I think that both ends? I think he's a good hire. I think it allows them to keep the same front that they normally run. I think a lot of the same principles. They're going to blitz more. I know, Rich and others have tweeted out, hey, they're going to play a lot of zone under Wilkes. I have a feeling it'll be a significant amount more man than they played last year. I think 30-ish% they played man this year, which was down quite a bit from 2022 and 2023, which bit of a mistake. Obviously, injuries to Michael Carter and, DJ Reed and Sauce and all these guys having different things, Salah, et cetera, definitely affected that. And, Aaron Glenn played, I think, 44 or 45% cover one and cover zero last year. So with much less talented, corners. So in my opinion, so I like the hire. I think, again, veteran mind, veteran name, and most importantly, don't have to flip their front. They can kind of keep a lot of same principles, but it's going to be a more aggressive style. So to me, DCs are usually coordinator hires. It's sometimes, especially in the defensive side of the ball, you can kind of plug and play in different things. So I like the hire. I'm not going to sit here and tell you that the Jets just hired 2007 Rex Ryan as their DC, but I also think that he's a significant upgrade from Jeff Ulbrich, who we might have to have some uncomfortable conversations. As someone that got duped a little bit this year, the last two times Jeff Ulbrich has been just the DC in Atlanta with no Salah this year. Not great. So D, what do you think? What are you thinking on Wilkes?
Yeah, I think it's really interesting, his history. And I might do a deep dive another time, but some of the guys he's been around, Peanut Tillman, Antonio Cromartie, Eric Weddle, Josh Norman, he's been around really talented players. Talk less of, Luke Kuechly, who's one of my favorite players of all time. But he's been around really, really, really elite players, and he's been there for a lot of their development. And so I think that part is pretty exciting. It's good to know that he knows what these players look like, which is really important, particularly in draft one, with, the Jets kind of in flux in front office as they bring in new guys. It's really important to have a front office that kind of knows what to look for, or sorry, a coaching staff and a front office, but more importantly, the coaching staff, knowing what to look for. And so I do like that aspect. And then in terms of tendencies, I think you made a really good point there about man versus zone. Obviously, we won't know until we see it, but people just very quickly forgot after the hire that Aaron Glenn is the head coach, and I think they're going to lean towards his philosophies, regardless of if he's calling plays or not. And I think also he's going to get in and he's going to look at the players that he has and be like, yeah, this is probably what I should do. I'm sure everyone sees the Sauce Gardner tweets, but he had one really poignant one after the hire, which is showing his man coverage stats. And, in terms of how good he plays man, I think that the Jets obviously going to consider doing that a little bit more often. Just play to your player strengths. And I think that's something that Aaron Glenn has done well in the past, and Steve Wilkes as well. So yeah, I think it's a good hire. I think one of the things that we've seen in terms of the staff as we kind of keep going through here. We'll move on to Extrand next, but that Wilkes hire definitely has the similar tendrils as a lot of the other hires there. A lot of Ron Rivera flavor. Uh, but yeah, we'll get into that. So OC hire finally happened. This is arguably the most important hire, and the Jets got Tanner Engstrand from the Detroit Lions, who was their passing coordinator and tight ends coach. So, what are your thoughts there? I think it's really interesting. Somebody made a good point that uh, Dan Campbell, as a former tight ends coach, is not going to just hire a random person to be tight ends coach and then make them passing coordinator, and then that person not be super talented. But what were your thoughts there? Because it was a hire that you know, is somewhat of a risk in the fact that he has not called plays. It is a risk. He hasn't called plays. He's fairly young, but he has good experience. Um, and for the most part, it seems to be an unknown, but a lot of the feedback that we've been hearing has been positive. So yeah, what are your thoughts there?
Yeah, there's a couple different things that kind of come to mind here. I think if you look back, maybe not a month ago, but a month ago ish, I think Joe talked about this a little bit too, but he was a name that if Aaron Glenn was going to be the head coach, you were trying to do the connected dots of like who would he bring over from Detroit? Was it Burnell, JT Barrett? I think it was it felt like a shoe, and then Eggstrom would get the Lions OC job. And I felt like he was not going to be a guy that was really on the table, because you looked around at the line staff, you're like, all right, so if Ben Johnson leaves, and then who's next?
Right.
And I asked some people that kind of coached with him in the past, in the last couple of years, and things like that, and they all had, hey, he's a boy genius, like super smart football mind. It's a lot of the, I don't want to say it's a lot of what we heard with LaFleur, but it is somewhat of a, hey, like it's a guy coming from a really good offensive tree, in terms of Ben Johnson as a play caller. Again, not Ben Johnson, the head coach necessarily. And X-Train's not coming here to be the head coach. And I think that's important where, I thought LaFleur had some, especially early on, look, X-Train called plays in college, and, he's done a good job, obviously, in the passing game stuff. It was, frankly, some of the stuff that Jets need a lot of help with, scheming ways to get Garrett Wilson the ball in more advantageous situations, getting Breece Hall involved in the passing game, things like that. And we've seen that where, hey, Amon-Ra in the slot, like Garrett's I think objectively a guy that has a higher ceiling than Amon-Ra, and I'm a USC guy, so like it takes a lot out of me to say that. But obviously from a size perspective and different way can play differently positionally, but even the tight ends too. And you look in Detroit, they use obviously they used Hawkinson this way, they use Laporta, and they use some of their other guys. The 6 offensive linemen with Dan Skipper come in at different times. Like I think a lot of those things. I don't know if he'll do the exact same things as Ben Johnson, but it'll at least be some of the same principles that, hey, like Ben Johnson was able to maximize Jared Goff, and there's a world in which this offseason or over the next maybe 12 months, the Jets have to kind of have a similar situation, whether it's Rodgers or it's Fields and Tyrod, or it's, I don't know, take the fucking name. I don't know who it's going to be, but I do know that they're going to probably have to win as a team and have their quarterback kind of protect the football, take advantage of some big plays, create some easy shot plays and play action stuff. So again, I like the hire. Am I 10% skeptical in terms of what it's going to look like just because of what I said, quarterback? He hasn't called plays at the NFL level, and hasn't called plays, and obviously I think about 5 years now, and which is totally fair. Like it's what you do. You work your way up in college and then try to work your way up in the NFL.
Mm-hmm.
And then lastly is just this hire has to come with a veteran offensive assistant. If they don't do that, then we're going to be looking at a lot of the similar things we just kind of were dealing with. If they hire a veteran assistant, albeit Todd Haley or someone of that ilk, yeah, it's a much different conversation. Like, all right, cool. He again can lean on someone that's been through this a million times. And hey, like, I'm going to help you with scripting plays and doing these different things. So again, on the surface, I like the hire. I just think it's, probably going to be hiring David Blow here as their quarterback coach, who's 28, and things like that. So a combination of young quarterback coach, young OC, definitely got to get, a veteran offensive assistant in there. And I think it would complete this kind of trio. Sean Jefferson staying on is a nice addition as well.
Absolutely. I do like the balance of this in terms of the young offensive staff and the more veteran defensive staff. I think that, a lot of the hypotheticals that folks like to talk about, particularly when the Jets seem to be making hires for whatever reason, is if this goes really well, this guy might be gone, and then what are you going to do? I think, despite the fact that it's never really that, it never goes like that, as you can see with Detroit finally losing Ben Johnson after like two or three off seasons.
We were worried about was going to get hired elsewhere, and the Jets decided to irrationally fire him, and now he's going to get hired elsewhere. So,
exactly.
Even when they do it the right way, they still don't get it right.
Exactly. So, but it's good to see with this staff, you got a young offensive staff that's going to grow with the team. You have a more veteran defensive staff, and I think the confidence that you have with that defensive staff is, if the defense plays really well and Steve Wilkes is gone, then the head coach is Aaron Glenn. Like, you have other veteran guys in that room, but with that offensive staff, you just have so much room to grow. So, I think that senior assistant hire is going to be super important. And let's just hope that they keep that in mind and actually make the hire. But we'll see how it goes. Todd Haley will be a great name if you hopefully if they do make that hire. It'll do a little deep dive there. Very interesting amount of experience, like super interesting. It's pretty cool. But let's talk about real quick. We don't have to go too in depth. Eric Washington, the defensive line coach, obviously moving on from Aaron White Cotton. Is almost like taking a binky away from a child in terms of what the Jets were able to get out of their defensive line. The first few years of the Saleh regime, obviously the last one was not great. But what are your thoughts on that hire? And just the connection to mostly Steve Wilkes there through that Ron Rivera tree.
Yeah, so I just kind of hit out all three of the bigger name defensive ones at once. Chris Harris can be their passing game and DB's coach. Aaron Curry's can be their linebackers coach, and obviously Eric Washington, D line coach. I think Harris and Curry, obviously from the former player route, you got the kind of a lot of that Lions mold of. Now I talked about this maybe 2 weeks ago, I guess, or whenever Glenn got hired. I don't know. Time is like I have no conceptualization of what time is anymore. So whenever Glenn got hired, it was like, hey, what kind of staff's he going to build? And we've seen, former players, GM, obviously didn't make it far in the league, but still former player, obviously former player head coach, former player DBs, former player linebacker coach. Sean Jefferson, obviously former player. Like, there's a lot of names there. Maybe not necessarily as big a names as we're in Detroit, but like there are still guys that can relate to players. I think the Aaron Curry hire to me is one that's particularly intriguing. Got a chance to spend some time with him, and he was down at Wake and different things like that. This guy was the 4th overall pick and like an athletic freak and wanted to get back into football, wanted to get back into coaching. And Mike Tomlin took him under his wing. And like we saw, I'm not saying he's going to be Brian Flores down the line, and I'm not saying that, but it's a lot of a similar thing where Tomlin brought Flores in. He actually worked with Curry when he was in Pittsburgh. And it's like, did Curry pick up just one or two little things from Tomlin, one or two things from playing, and then one or two things from Flores being there? And like, linebacker's an important position. I think that we talk about the Jets as if we haven't really had to worry about linebacker in a long time. And there's a legitimate argument that they might have a full set of basically all new starters outside of Quincy. And even Quincy is a guy who is probably going to be looking for an extension. I've talked about this for a while, and we'll see what the Jets do. He's going to be 29 years old. And who knows what they kind of go with. Do they extend him? They let him play and then let him walk? Who knows? CJ, feels like it's probably done here, and maybe for football in general, but who knows? Sherwood, like who knows there? Like it could be an $8 million, a year guy, and it's fine. And or Robert Saleh pony, gets that to San Francisco and is like, I want Jamie and Sherwood because I drafted him and look at my ego. So no, I just that one's interesting. Again, Harris is interesting as well as obviously in Detroit with Glenn, and then you mentioned Washington. This is a guy who's been in DC multiple times, and not just been in DC multiple times, been in DC. Him and Wilkes have been DCs the last 2 years, and I think that's important because we mentioned some of these other hey, they're going the retread route, but this guy hasn't been in DC in a long time. Like, no, this is a guy who called plays last year, and the Bears defensive line, he's coming in with a lot more talent. We've seen when he's had talent as a defensive coordinator. He's a D coordinator now, but McDermott, he's got the McDermott, Rivera, Wilkes kind of roots, and he's a guy who's been the D coordinator of the best, of a team that was the number one defense in the league. So in his past, that hire was particularly interesting. Again, I think there's a wealth of experience across both sides of the ball, but there's also there's the high ceiling hires like Harris and Curry, Eggstrand, obviously, names like that. Then there's like the high floor guys like Washington and Wilkes, Sean Jefferson. Like there's just, I think they're doing a good job. And I know I'm too positive. Well, okay, listen, they're doing a good job at the moment of, David Blow would be a high ceiling quarterback coach option, right? He's only 28. He can relate to these players he's played, but he's obviously only 28. So, and then if you partner him and Haley, is that a good mix of, intense, crazy motherfucker that like was coaching forever, mixed with a guy who's like, I just finished playing 2 or 3 years ago, and I can still get, like there's, again, I think relatability, but also the Parcells, Peyton, in your face. I'm going to make sure like you are not going to, you're not going to mess around here. Like training camps can be very different this year. Last year, I think I talked a lot about it. The Jets hit more last year in camp. They went full pads more than they had in the past. But the practices felt, I don't know. Maybe it's just like revisionist history, but even asking some people, I was like, did I like get duped by like, oh, they're hitting more, which is good. No one got hurt during camp. And honestly, the Jets injuries this year, outside of like a couple of guys, Moses and Carter, who just, were really hurt all year and like could not. Yeah. They actually did a pretty decent CJ too. But other than that, it felt like, generally speaking, I know there's always injuries, but I felt like there's been a lot more soft tissue stuff in years past. So they did a good job with that. But the practices themselves, I don't feel like there was this intensity of like the coaching staff intensity. You know what I mean? Like it was like, oh yeah, like we're gonna hit a lot. But then like, which is cool, but like you also got to bring the juice too. You can't just rely on players to bring the juice all the time. So I think that's something I'm really excited about is, again, experience as well as youth, which is a good mix. There's always we talk about this. Me and you have talked about this with soccer a lot. And I know a lot of people here don't listen. Like, don't. The best teams in soccer are always teams that have these like 3 or 4 veterans that are probably a year or two past it, but like have the wealth of experience, always come up big. They can play calm on the road. And then you have like 3 or 4 electrifying young guys. And there's a couple guys in their prime. And it's like this great mix. And right now the Jets staff is like Glenn's in his prime, right? He should be, he's worth all, the proper amount of experience. Wilkes is a guy who, hey, maybe him and Washington are like probably on the back half of their career, I guess, if you want to call it that. But the wealth of experience, and Engstrand and these other guys, it's like, hey, we got the exciting young guy that might be inconsistent week to week, but if we can be consistent on the defensive side of the football and the talent can take over, we might be all right. So that's kind of where I'm at with the staff as a whole. Again, I think there's a lot of wait and see, but Glenn's done a good job of not just saying, I'm going to take the whole Detroit staff, and Chris Banjo too. Look, Chris Banjo is going to bring Mike Westhoff with him again. Great balance. Former player. He's 33 years old, or 34, I believe, which is like sickening that him and David Blow were like that young. But again, former player, was a kind of big hitter as a player and got that special teams mindset. But he came up under Westhoff, and Westhoff's apparently going to be helping out. So again, it's that balance of like young guy with potential mixed with that veteran mind who, again, might be past it, quote unquote, for like that, but that experience is valuable. So that's kind of where I land on this staff.
Yeah, it's really interesting. I think, as much as you try to like guard yourself and just be like, okay, I know I was excited about the Aaron Glenn hire. Maybe I should just like tone my excitement. Maybe I'm getting or seeing things that aren't there. But I think it is true. Like a lot of these balanced staffs, that's kind of how you can keep a steady room in that locker room and keep things moving in the right direction. Particularly when you go through a lot of hard times and then when you go through the good times, So I think that balance is super important. So, um, yeah, so that's the staff. Now, I want to hear about how things were for you at Mobile. So let's
Yeah,
talk Senior Bowl,
yeah.
brother.
Mobile's a fun place, man. It's really cool, like what the Senior Bowl means to the city, and I think it's my brother was working down there, and like I think he said that a stat which blew my mind. I think it's 47% of their economy for the year is this entire week, and like it is really cool, and it just shows you like one of those, it's a cute little city and stuff like that, and obviously all that, but it is really awesome to. It's always awesome to get down there. Being on the field all week was really exciting. There was a lot of guys that stood out. There were some dropouts last second, which always happens every year. Obviously it was frustrating, for guys like Will Howard or Quinn Ewers or
Yeah.
Alfred Collins, just some names that, in full transparency, I'm got I think bad advice, from their agents and things like that of guys that felt like they didn't have a lot more to prove or, hey, I don't necessarily need this. And I actually thought, based on how people were talking about Jackson Dart this week, Will Howard could have had himself a heck of a week. And you look at guys like that, or and just there's obviously always names, and Cam and Shador obviously decided to go the I don't need this, but I'm going to do a press tour anyways, and that's fine, and that's a topic for another conversation over beers. But it was a good week. Got great weather. I got sunburn, so that's always a positive.
So let's talk about it. Let's talk
Yeah.
about it. You got to see Jackson Dart. You got to see all the quarterbacks. I will phrase the question this way: was there a large gap between what you saw from Jackson Dart and the other quarterbacks at the Senior Bowl?
It's a good question. So this is what I would say with the quarterbacks down there. Just kind of to walk people through just quickly. The week's very hectic for these quarterbacks more than anything. I think you see a lot of these guys, especially, people remember in years past of Braden Fisk went from a guy who was probably a round 3, round 4 guy, moved up to the
Yeah.
top 40. Again, if you did a redraft today of last year's draft, he's probably going in the top 12, 14. He's an awesome player, but you can kind of come in and just, hey, man, I'm just going to run through, and Shamar Stewart's words, I'm going to run through a motherfucker's face. Like it's a lot easier. These drills are kind of like, you're getting a lot of positional individual drills and team and stuff. And sometimes it's a little easier to just get right back into things as a skill guy or as a trench player. A lot of these quarterbacks, for the most part, outside of Riley Leonard and maybe one or two others, they've never taken a snap under center. They've never called a play in a huddle. They've never done some of these things. And you could tell day one, Jalen Milroe and Jackson Dart have never taken a snap under center.
Mm.
They must have fumbled the combined 12 times at least.
Oof.
I thought Dart got better